Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Hey, it's Shaun from the Edge of Liberty. Join me right here on the SHR Media Network every Monday and Friday, 12 on the Pacific, 3 on the East Coast. On this show, we'll discuss news, politics, the government, how cranky we are about the government, and more. If you want to hear hard talk, good interviews, sarcasm, bad jokes, and, oh, God, that really is me in a nutshell. Either way, check me out right here on the Edge of Liberty every Monday and Friday, 12 Pacific, 3 on the East, on the SHR Media Network. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Edge of Liberty. It is Friday, holy cow, the 27th of September, 2024. Welcome to the show. My name's Shaun, one of the hosts here at SHR Media. Thank you for giving me your time, and thank you for giving me your ears and your eyes, and I'm really sorry I look like this. I want to start off the end of the show. I'm going to tell you, I'm trying to find just parts of this to add to the show that can be enjoyable and just different, not always politics and not always news, because it gets exhausting. So I'm going to try this week, being it Friday and cocktail day for most people. I'm going to give you my cocktail for the weekend, and hopefully you'll enjoy it. I do want to start off. Oh God, I want to start off in the southeast Hurricane Helene. Fortunately, I did talk to Jersey Joe. They made it all right through the storm. Lots of wind, some rain, but not too bad. I've seen some other pictures sent to me from other friends that I know who pretty much had the same thing. According to the National Hurricane Center in Miami, Helene roared ashore at 11:10 p.m. last evening at the mouth of the Asilla River in the Big Bend area of Florida's Gulf Coast. It had a maximum sustained winds of 140 miles an hour. It was Cat 4. The location was only about 20 miles northeast of where Hurricane Idalia came ashore last year. And the flooding coming up through North Carolina, South Carolina, I know Tennessee, Kentucky, they're getting some of it as well too. And I'm going to show you the radar right now. This is from the National Hurricane Center, or the National Weather Center, no, Hurricane Center. And it's just, man, it's rough. Let's, there it is. There we go. So that's where it is right now. And it's widespread. Look how big. That storm is just a monster. It's absolutely a monster. And I hope, if you're in the way, I know Tampa really took a big hit. I know the storm surge was pretty incredible. I really just hope that you and yours are safe. And, I heard from one viewer, or one follower, I should say, on X. Pam was her name, who said that her power's out, but she has cookies and chips, so she'll be all right. And as we know, the power being out is probably going to be one of the biggest issues. On top of, according to the Associated Press, over 30 people have perished as a result of this storm, which is just tragic and horrible. And, I know we deal with this, and I know hurricanes are nothing new. I remember hurricanes as a kid. I grew up on the East Coast. I remember hearing about them down south, and it was rough. And I know the folks in the Southeast are strong, able, and fighters, and they'll get through this. Our hearts go out to those who lost loved ones in this. And, be prepared, because it's still flash flood warnings like crazy all the way up the East Coast. This is extending way out. So it's not just the wind. It's a tropical storm now. It's not just the wind. It's not just the surges and stuff. It's also the flash flooding from the rain. It's dumping a ton of rain, and you gotta take care of yourself. And I'll give you a look one more time here. Take care of your loved ones. And there's one of those times, and I'm not always a big fan of government, but this is one of those times you want to listen to emergency services, emergency centers, all that, and make sure that they're trying to give you good information. It's one of the few times that, like, I don't believe there's an overwhelming bias. They just want people to stay safe. Usually, those folks. I've worked in those emergency centers. I've seen them in operation, and I know they do good work. So just listen to your local authorities on this one. Be safe, and we wish you well here from SHR Media and, of course, the Edge of Liberty show. It's always tragic. It really is. And like I said, I know the people down there are rough and tumble folk, but it's still not something you should take lightly. So moving on from that, speaking of the hurricane, oh gosh, never let a good tragedy go to waste, right? Wasn't that Rahm Emanuel, the former Chicago mayor, and he worked in the White House, right, for Obama? I'm going to show you this video that was released this morning, and this is from Kimla HQ, and they're talking about Project 2025, and this is on the Daily Signal, and they're highlighting this as Trump. Trump is going to take away assistance for hurricane victims, and I just want you to realize, and like I said, it's at Kamala HQ on X. Just realize how quickly they will exploit a tragedy for their own gain. It's absolutely crazy to me. It's disgusting. And so they post this video, and that was their claim, is that all of a sudden this is the Trump advancing to take away any of the hurricane assistance.
FEMA and focusing on its mission of backing up states. People think of it as a first responder. It's not a first responder. States and localities are the first responders. FEMA is there to back them up. And if we focus them more narrowly, when they're deployed, they will do a better job. And they'll be deployed in those areas that are highest priority, highest need. So it's conservative, limited government approaches like that you'll see throughout the chapter. For instance, on shrinking FEMA and focusing on its mission.
It's so ridiculous that this is even a conversation. People don't realize, and he even brought this up, but one of the things you have to understand about FEMA's job is to back up the local authorities, right? FEMA is not, they're not on the ground in the sense that your local authorities are. And I've worked with public safety for a long time. I've been through major events. I worked for a police department during 9/11. When FEMA is activated for an incident, they are the go-between for services from the federal government and local officials. That's what they do. And I'm not undermining it and trying to say, it's this is how minimal their job is. That's not at all the case. The case is that is what they do. Hey, what do you need? What do you think you're going to need, right? They're usually activating for a major event like a hurricane a week ahead of time, or as soon as they know something really is going to hit. What do you think you're going to need? How can we help? What resources can we give you? And they coordinate. And they've gotten increasingly better at it. I mean, we all remember Katrina and how horrible it was. But that's what FEMA does. So to say they're narrowing their scope, what they're saying is they're just going to be better at what they do. They're going to be more efficient, which, as much as FEMA, the folks that work there, try to do a good job, there's a ton of waste at FEMA. I'll tell you right now, I can remember there was some flooding in northern Massachusetts, and FEMA was activated, and I was working some overtime stuff there, and the amount of waste I watched, and I didn't work for the federal government. It wasn't my job at the time. I was just sitting there making sure nobody screwed up. It was unbelievable, right? They'd order all this food and then throw it all away, right? So it needs to be, there's nothing wrong with the federal government looking at its services and saying, hey, maybe we can clean this up. As a taxpayer, that's what I want. I want it to be cleaned up. We have to clean it up. That's how we save money. And if your goal is not to be as efficient as possible as a government agency, you have no goal, because you're not going to be effective. The more efficient you are at a job, the more effective you are. And that doesn't mean that you can't add things in. That doesn't mean that you can't expand in certain areas, but that it's still being efficient. You are adapting the model of your operations to what the necessity is, and not just throw a shite load of money at a problem until it goes away. FEMA does spend a ton of money for these events and other events, not just this one. And there's nothing wrong with the idea of making it more efficient. But, of course, Kamala HQ has to throw that out literally as a hurricane is rolling through. 30 people have died and people are suffering and people are trying to get their lives back together and see what tomorrow is going to bring. It's sad. It's a completely sad situation that they would even do that. Speaking of the Harris campaign, because we might as well just keep going right into it before we get into the break, hopefully. Morning Joe. You all know Morning Joe. You love Morning Joe. They had a couple of pencil necks on this morning, and I'll use that term very, 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 very accurately, to discuss why Kamala Harris is polling poorly with males from every walk of life, every racial background, financial, whatever. And I'm going to let you watch, and then we will react.
So they still believe they can and will win Pennsylvania, but they feel good about Michigan. They feel good about Wisconsin, relatively good. It may be a landslide. Maybe they'll win by a full percentage point in both of those states. But in Pennsylvania, they know it's going to be a fight, and it's going to be a fight because she's doing better, much better among women and most young voters, but older white men, just like people thought after Biden left the race. More of a challenge, pulling them to vote against Trump again.
Yeah, I mean, older white men and actually younger white men too, also a bit of a challenge. I mean, that number they'll like a lot, up +5 in Pennsylvania, because you're right, it's the new Ohio, it's the new Florida, it's the state where they see they have the most problems. And of course, then either the concern or the upside, depending on how you look at this from the Harris campaign's point of view, is that Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin people think will break the same way. That's what they've done traditionally ever since 1980. I think there's one exception. And so if they lose Pennsylvania, what would that then mean for Wisconsin and Michigan? If they win Wisconsin and Michigan, does that mean they're going to win Pennsylvania? But that's why they're putting so much resources into that. But it's men. I mean, I think the real struggle for the Harris campaign is young men, older men, men of color, white men, and they are doing all they can. You can see, I think the debate next week will be really interesting to see how.
Yes, it will be really interesting. That's for sure. It will be very interesting. So the problem is white men, young men, old men, men of color, men, that whatever that song was. But doesn't it shock anybody, or it shouldn't shock anyone? That's probably a better way of putting it. It does not shock anybody that the party who has for years and years, since the end of the Obama administration, middle of the Obama administration, have attacked men for being the problem in this country, right? The Me Too movement, while there were people who were absolutely victimized and they should have been treated like victims, there were plenty of cases where they were not victimized. People were just making claims. You have them toxic masculinity. How many times have you heard that fucking friggin' phrase? I'm on during the day. How many times have you heard it? Toxic masculinity, right? They try to demonize males for being males. And that doesn't mean toxic masculinity isn't just, I'm going to wake up and go fight something or blow something up or shoot something. No. Toxic masculinity is trying to be the best man you can be. And yeah, is it in our DNA to probably have some differences with females? Yes. We're not being toxic by being males. It's okay. And Jordan Peterson said this, and I agree. It's okay to be a male. You can still be a rough and tumble guy and be a good guy. We had Chris Peranto, who survived 13 hours in Benghazi, was an Army Ranger, has deployed so many times. And he even said the other day, and this guy is rough and tumble as you get, right? He would be what they would consider toxic masculinity embodied. And what did he say on the show the other day? He's like, love is what gives you strength. So just because guys are doing masculine things, quote unquote, does not mean that we're somehow this evil. Now, are there evil people out there? Yeah. Are there evil males out there? Yes. Are there evil females out there? Absolutely too. Right? But evil is not gender specific. Mean is not gender specific. It is a personality trait or flaw is probably a better way of putting it. It is. Look at Hillary Clinton. You know what talks about toxic femininity, right? Every time Hillary Clinton gets in trouble or got in trouble or politically was in trouble, she was blaming guys. How many times did she say stuff when she was Secretary of State like, well, if this was a male or if this was a male, this wouldn't happen, whatever. And she alluded to that numerous times, right? Kamala Harris, she has said it a bunch of times. So you wonder why males don't want to go in and pull a handle for somebody who has turned them into everything that's wrong. Look, white terrorism is the biggest problem we have in this country, right? White supremacy, white terrorism, males. You wonder why these kids who are in high school, these young boys who are now in college, and they said there is the increase of young males registering Republican in colleges through the roof. Why do you think that is? Well, they went through high school where they were teaching this crap. And you're being told just by showing up, whether you've done nothing in the world wrong to anybody, just by showing up, there is a problem with you. Plain and simple. Remember manspreading? That whole thing where they were trying to redesign seats so guys couldn't sit with their legs apart because we're built different? It hasn't ended for years. It's been going on. And I've said before, toxic femininity is just as much of a problem in this country. Nobody wants to talk about that. How many teachers are female? How many kids who have a single mom that are angry? And you can get mad at me all you want. This is true. I'm not making this up. And they go to schools where a majority of the instructors and teachers are female, and they have their opinions, and those opinions get voiced. And I'm not saying that women shouldn't teach, and I'm not saying there shouldn't be single moms, whatever, but you can see how it is possible for a lot of these young boys to experience toxic femininity, and it's horrible. Nobody should experience anything toxic as a youth. And I'm not saying we should jade kids from this or that or whatever. No. I mean, toxic. Absolutely changing your soul, changing how you exist, changing who you are, being told you're not good enough. Toxic. Are there going to be bullies? Yeah. Are bullies always bad? Nah. I was bullied growing up, and I'll tell you right now, it probably wasn't a bad thing. Does that mean that I want every kid in the world to be bullied? No. But there's definitely some times where it's not always a bad thing. I am up against a break. When we come back, I want to talk about Israel and everything that's going on with Israel and Hezbollah right after this on the Edge of Liberty on the SH.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Welcome to River of Common Sense, where we cut through the noise of news and politics with a sharp wit and clear discussion. Tune in every Monday and Friday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for a refreshing dose of reality as we fearlessly tackle the tough topics with no nonsense, just pure common sense. Visit shrmedia.com to discover where you can catch River of Common Sense in action. He's here to amplify your inner logic. He may not always be polite, he may not always be refined, but one thing's for sure, he always tells it like it is.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
And welcome back to the Edge of Liberty on the SHR Media Network. I am Shaun, your host. I said I was going to go to Israel. I'm not going to duck my Israel stories, but I do want to add, just because we were talking about Kamala and we were talking about just the election in general, and we're talking about Kamala, talking about the election, yada yada yada. That's what we keep doing here, because guess what, folks? It's a month and a few days away. It's coming up fast, and I never like it when somebody says, "Oh, this is the election that could change everything," but here we are. It's, as Reagan said, we're only one generation away, right? And every election can be considered part of a generation. So let's go to the border now, and I'm gonna play this, and it's from Fox News, and it's gonna tell you just how bad the border is. And let me tell you before I play this, the numbers, according to ICE Director Patrick Leitliner, I screwed that up, says there are 13,000 known illegal immigrants that were convicted of homicide and 15,000 convicted of sexual assault that have been released into this country. Think about those numbers for a second. That's insane. That is insane. When Trump was saying they're releasing all of their prisoners, they're emptying out their asylums, it's accurate. It sounds like it was accurate. And they're sending them on a bus. And look, I know for a fact that there were cities in California 10 years ago that when they had a problematic person who was just repeatedly problematic, one of the things that they would offer them is a bus ticket to another city. They would absolutely do what they can to pass the buck. If you're Venezuela, if you're El Salvador, if you're any of those countries that have a very, very high violence rate, Brazil, why wouldn't you try to get rid of those people and send them elsewhere? And when the border's here, look, we knew the border was open. We knew that before Biden got into office. People forget his words that he was saying, and Kamala, when they were on the campaign trail in 2020 or 2019 to 2020, they were talking about reversing all of Trump's terrible border policies. And they had no plan in place to put into place to replace them at all. I could not have said place more times in that sentence. I apologize. But that's what they were doing. So much so that the caravan started the minute the election was called. The caravans, if you don't remember, the caravans were on their way and sitting in Mexico waiting for Biden to step into that office, and Harris, and undo the executive orders done by Donald J. Trump. That is not an exaggeration. That is absolutely 100% factual. That is what happened. That is when the border was open for business, so to speak. So if you're these countries and you're like, man, I got 30,000 prisoners that are costing us a ton of money. There's fights, there's violence, there's all this other stuff. What if we just get rid of them? What if we just put them on the road north? And this is what happens. This is 100%. And this is just what we know about, folks. This isn't the gotaways. This isn't the ones who maybe they've changed their name or they don't have fingerprints on file. That's the other thing you don't realize. We're so used to this country, all the technology to link people, social security numbers, fingerprints, photo ID, video tech, all that other stuff, to link individuals to their criminal record. A lot of these countries don't do a good job at it, or it's newer technology, or they just purge them because they're trying to get rid of them. There's a lot of corruption in these countries. So people come to the border, and this doesn't include the people that are coming from other parts of the world, Asia, Africa, Middle East, right? India. You have to start realizing what has happened to this country. And I'm not anti-immigrant when they are legal, good people. I have plenty of friends. I can't say this a million. I'll say it a billion times. I will stand at the top of the rooftops and shout this. Almost everybody on this side of the aisle appreciates immigrants. The legal ones who come here do it the right way, pay into the system. They do everything that we did, that relatives did. They got here, they worked themselves to get their citizenship, or they're on the path to citizenship and they're doing it the right way. And by the way, the amount of money, and I don't know what it costs now, but I know what it used to cost, upward of $10,000, $12,000 just to get here for the chance to become a citizen. To get your visa, you have to have a certain amount of money if you're going to stay for an extended period of time. If you're trying to become a citizen, yada, 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 yada. It was never easy. And why was it never easy? Because of what this country is. We're the greatest country on the planet. We have the most opportunity. We used to have reasonable tax rates. It used to be that a middle-class person here could own a nice home. It used to be a middle-class person could afford to live comfortably. It used to be middle class was obtainable. You look at it now, is it obtainable? Has anything in the last 4 years told you it's obtainable? No. No. And I know they want to blame Trump. Oh, this is all Trump. This is all Trump. No. It was COVID, which came from China. However, it came from China. China is still responsible. Trump didn't import COVID and shut down the economy that was booming that he did. I don't care what you say. And look, it came from China. We could talk about that a million times. But that changed the course of the economy in this country and our freedoms and a whole bunch of other stuff that I can go on and on and on. But when it comes to immigration and why people come here, before that, people came here because it's the land of opportunity. They came, look at if you haven't seen the commercial by the Senate candidate in Virginia, Hung Kao, you have to watch it. You have to watch it. Growing up in a communist Vietnam and what the communists did to his parents, and that story. Lily Tang Williams, another one, and I talk about Lily a lot because she's a friend of the show. But coming over from communist China, and these people, and there is a lot of people that grew up in Soviet Russia that heed the same warnings. You have to know and understand where these folks came from and why they're fighting so hard to make sure this country doesn't end up there. And I'll tell you right now, there's some major Western civilizations that are struggling right now. Look at Europe and what they're doing with immigration. All the major countries are stopping immigration and starting to deport people other than England. The UK, who is more focused on prosecuting protesters. And again, something we take for granted here, they're not in the UK. All these little maggot protesters that are out, protesting Jewish folks and protesting Israel and protesting this and protesting that. Look, you have a right to protest, but your protesting is just as prejudice, especially the pro-Hamas people. And now the pro-Hezbollah people, is just as prejudice. So I don't want to hear it. You look overseas and you look at some of these countries. Try doing that in China. Try doing that in Gaza before Hamas was lit up like a Christmas tree. Try doing that in any of those places. Protest the governments in other places. See what happens. It's horrific. Look at China, North Korea, China, the Uyghurs, the Muslim Uyghurs that are still in the prison camps. Nobody talks about that. You wonder why people are flooding here and why when they heard it was available to be flooded too. Right? I say it all the time. If you live in a major city, not out in the country, you live in a major city and it's gorgeous weather, leave your doors open for a little while and go out for a few hours overnight. Right? You leave the screen closed so the bugs don't get in if you want. Just leave it unlocked. In a big city, 2, 3, 4 days. See what happens. See what you come home to. Yeah. Is every single time you come home, is your house going to be destroyed? No. Is there a really good percentage it will? Yes, because you don't know who's in there while you're gone. That doesn't mean everybody is a bad person, but that does mean we have to watch out for the bad people, and we have to have a system. These numbers don't include the gotaways. That's the other thing. You talk about the gotaways that happened under this administration. They literally just opened the friggin' floodgates. And you wonder why crime is starting to go through. And I know there was that report, oh, the crime's down in 2023. Well, first of all, let's see what 2024 crime rates. And second of all, look at the major cities that get left off that FBI crime report. Do not tell me crime is down. You can tell me crime is down, and I'll believe you just as much as you say inflation is down. And we should be so happy to pay what we're paying. We're so damn lucky. I just saw that. I forget what moron from the government said that. Well, he was a state rep, maybe. And essentially his whole thing about the economy is, we've never had it so good. We're not doing as bad as other people. You should be happy. Shut up and vote Kamala. That was really what it comes down to. He said it with a lot of big words, but it's shut up and eat cake and vote for Kamala. And they're doing the same thing with immigration. They're acting like immigration, it doesn't exist. Yeah, they'll admit to it. And when they do, all of a sudden they're worried more about the path to citizenship for these folks. Or they're talking about giving more money away to these folks that you and I, the taxpayer, are paying for. I don't mind helping people that need help. But there's a whole lot of people in this country we should have been focused on. That the border, if it was secured, all of those resources that we're spending in all of these big cities, LA, San Francisco, New York, Chicago, and on and on and on. The amount of money we could have sent there to help, I don't know, the veterans, the mentally ill, which is a conversation nobody still wants to have in this country, and I can't figure out why. I can't figure out why nobody wants to talk about the mental illness in this country on a federal level. I know we talk about it in our circles. I know social media, it's talked about all the time. Why are we not, as a society, saying, hey, there are mentally ill people who medication and letting them go about their day isn't enough for? Because you're trusting people who are mentally ill and homeless on top of it all. And I don't mean mentally ill. They try to like, oh, this person has depression. No. I'm talking about psychosis, violent people, right? And in cities like New York, LA, where they don't prosecute, they get arrested for these violent acts and they get kicked out the door. And then they come back in, arrested for these violent acts and kicked out the door. Because we don't talk about the mental illness problem in this country. Not on a federal level, not even on a state level. It gets mentioned. Oh, yeah, we really should do something about mental illness. Well, what are you going to do? Well, something. Okay. If I don't pay my taxes and you're like, hey, if you don't pay your taxes, you're going to go to jail. And I'll say, well, I'm going to do something. What are you going to do? Something. Is that going to fly? No. Try telling that to your boss if you haven't done shit at work for a couple weeks. It doesn't fly anywhere. Why does it fly for the federal government? It's like, it blows my mind. 13,000 known convicted of homicide. 13,000 murderers were just allowed into this country. 13,000. It's an astronomical number. And that's the one we know about. 15,000 convicted of sexual assault. How many reports have we seen recently of illegal immigrants, criminal aliens, that have committed homicide and sexual assaults? Look at Nantucket in Massachusetts alone. Nantucket, a sleepy island. And this tells you how brazen or dumb some of these criminals are. You had 3 illegal criminal aliens who were on Nantucket. Nantucket's not that big, folks. I've been there. It's not like you can run for miles in Nantucket if you commit a crime and get away. You can get on a boat and cross it or take a flight, but whatever. These guys committed the act, sexual assaults, I think all against children, maybe 2 out of 3. They got arrested from the Nantucket Police Department. The district attorney then released them, and they stayed on the island until ICE showed up and arrested them. And that's just Nantucket. By the way, Nantucket is like, they have like 2 cops on 24/7, or they used to. It's an extremely small town mentality. There's not a lot of people, not a big, not, and so that's the other thing too that I don't understand. And we talked earlier about toxic masculinity. A little bit was needed there, because I'll tell you right now, if I was on Nantucket, and even if I'm not, and either of my children were victimized like that, and I knew that person was still walking around, you know that because it's Nantucket. There's not that many people there. I'd end up in jail, and I bet you they wouldn't release me. I'll be the first one to say it, and I'll say it all day long. I'd have absolutely been on the news, and everybody would have known why, and I would have stood up proudly in court and said why, and I don't care. It's sad. Massachusetts, you look at the cases coming out of Massachusetts for sexual assault alone from these migrants. They are these criminal aliens who are being told, oh, they just want a chance. Yes, the good ones do. But how do we know who's who? How? We don't. And they just want more of this. This is that mentality that they look. I said this before. I've said this for a couple of years. Europe is always like 5 years ahead of us with stuff like this, like dealing with the mass immigration. They're like 5 years ahead of us, it always seems. They're now starting to lock all the doors. They're a couple of years ahead of us for letting everybody in, right? And I remember everybody freaked out on, what was it, Poland, because Poland was putting up fences and not letting people in. They're like, oh, you have to let them in. No, we don't. Screw you. We're our own country. We have our own borders. We have the right to protect ourselves and our citizens. And then the floodgates just opened in Europe from North Africa mostly. And now Germany, Denmark, I think, was it Finland and Sweden, Italy, and it could have been Portugal. Don't call me on that. They're now saying, hey, no more, and we're going to start deporting people. Why? Well, look at the number of murders and sexual assaults that are going on. It's absolutely out of control. And because a lot of these illegal migrants, for them, much like those coming up from South America, who are the criminal element version, not all, before everyone gets mad and reports me and takes my stuff down, they come from a place where they don't see females as equal. So they just do whatever they want. They're sick. They're absolutely sick. And that's not everybody, but that's a lot of them. They come from a lot of cultures where women are second-class citizens, and they just do whatever the males say. I don't get mad at me. I didn't make the culture. I'm just telling you how it is, and we know that. So Europe is now saying, hey, we got to cut the shit. We got to get rid of these people. We got to stop ASAP. And we're just, Kamala's still running. It's like, oh, well, these people need help. And you have so many Democrats out there like defending it. And this doesn't even include fentanyl coming over the border, which I'm not going to have time to talk about because I'm actually up against a break. Hey, folks, I appreciate you here joining me on SHR Media, my little afternoon show. I really do. If you are so inclined, there's a little Venmo thing up in the corner. I will take any amount of bourbon that you're willing to buy me a couple of drinks, and I'm going to give you a good recipe in the last couple of minutes of this show as to what you can enjoy this weekend. I'll be right back here on the
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Welcome to River of Common Sense, where we cut through the noise of news and politics with a sharp wit and clear discussion. Tune in every Monday and Friday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for a refreshing dose of reality as we fearlessly tackle the tough topics with no nonsense, just pure common sense. Visit shrmedia.com to discover where you can catch River of Common Sense in action. He's here to amplify your inner logic. He may not always be polite, He may not always be refined, but one thing's for sure, he always tells it like it is.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
And ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Edge of Liberty. The last 20 minutes of the show. Well, it's 19 now. Oh boy. I'm all worked up from the immigration thing. It's driving me nuts. And I know it's driving this whole country nuts. The only people who don't seem to be listening are the politicians. Well, not all of them. So I want to go over to the Middle East. I want to go over to Israel, actually, and I want to talk about what they've been doing to Hezbollah. And if you want to know what they're doing to Hezbollah, I'm going to show you, because they have not been messing around. Yeah, I mean, that's just one of many. They've been going at it for about 2 weeks now, hard into southern Lebanon, which, the fact that the Lebanese government allows Hezbollah to operate is mind-boggling to me, but that's a totally different topic, and that's a totally different segment. However, according to OSINT Defender, who is, if you don't follow him on Twitter, on X rather, before I get screamed at, really good aggregate of information coming out of Israel and the Middle East. And in the last hour, he's reporting they're reporting, I should say, the Israel Defense Forces reportedly assessed the Hezbollah strike. That one we just saw, the big one. And General Hassan Nasrallah was eliminated by tonight's strike in the command bunker in southern Beirut. And you might ask what the Hezbollah Secretary General is. Well, I mean, he's pretty much runs the whole show. He's the head of Hezbollah. They wanted to do it with Gaza. And I said before on my show, and I'll say it again, whether you agree or disagree with America being involved in conflict, the simple fact of the matter is Israel has the right to defend themselves, and Hezbollah in Gaza has been attacking them for years. And, this guy, Nasrallah, he's a cleric. He's part of the Shia Islamist party and militant group. And he's the one who's calling all the shots over there. And this is a major, major victory, if you will, for Israel. Because look, they took out so many of their comms. They have been, if you haven't watched these videos, go watch them. And I understand that there's collateral damage and how horrible it is, but there's also collateral damage from these guys in Israel too, from all the rockets that they've launched through the years and all the homes that were forced to be evacuated because of the threat that they bring. So if you go back and you watch all of these strike videos, how many have hit buildings and houses where you see repeated secondary explosions? You'll see the impact of the munition that was launched by Israel, and then you will see secondary explosions like crazy. Why is that? Because they're storing weapons in those houses and buildings. That's what they've always done. Gaza does the same thing. They put them in amongst the civilian population because they know when Israel comes to take them out, that the international community is going to go, oh, you're going too far, Israel. You're going too far. You can't do this. Well, Israel doesn't seem to care right now. And I can't say I blame them. You know, I always use the analogy, and I've used it on the show last week, and I'll keep using it. If that was my house and the next door neighbors kept shooting bullets through the walls, eventually you're going to get a response, especially when I go to the people who are supposed to fix it and they don't. So at what point do you, as an individual, at what point would you stop dealing with that and just get pissed and be like, fine, I'll do it myself? And that's what Israel's doing. And yeah, I know there's so many other conversations we could be having. There's all this stuff that's going on with Ukraine. I get that. But Israel's been dealing with this for years. And as I've said before, and I'll say it again, you got to remember, in the South, Gaza's the one, Hamas is the one that keeps walking away from these peace treaties. They had a peace treaty in place till October 7th. And then they not only broke the peace treaty, but they launched a horrific, gross, disgusting attack, took hostages. Hezbollah, who supports Hamas to a point, they support Hamas. They're Sunni and Shia. They're actually different parts of Islam, but they support him enough to say, oh, well, you know, I'd rather attack the great Satan, which is what they call Israel, and because we want them off the planet. We want them to be eliminated. All this money comes from our friends, quote unquote, in Iran. And I say our friends because our government has treated them like friends for the last 3.5 years, allowing them to make so much money to support and fund this. And now Israel, after weeks of bombing, and taking out the top leaders. And then there was the beeper thing that was just absolutely hysterical. I don't care if you call me a monster. That's the funniest shit that I've seen in such a long time. I don't even know what to say. And then the two-way radios, like they were just crushing their comms, crushing it. I'll tell you right now, if you were in southern Lebanon and you were a Hezbollah militia member, anything that beeped, microwaves, cars, whatever, you must have been freaking out just from that alone. But I do wonder, and I do kind of predict, and just by watching this, that Israel will now start slowing things down. That doesn't mean the strikes will end, but they're going to go back to being extremely limited and surgical. And, you know, the Israelis aren't bad people. I know there's so many people who hate Israel. It blows my mind every single time I hear somebody say that. They just want to be left alone. You know, they just want to live. And I can't say I blame them for the defending themselves. Does that mean I want troops on the ground over there? No, I don't. I don't want it. I don't want our troops on the ground anywhere. I don't want American blood spilled anywhere. I'm so over that. But I'll tell you right now, if the cartels in Mexico started coming up to the border and launching rockets into border towns and missiles into border cities, how long before we say to Mexico, you need to fix this? And when they don't, would we have to take action? This is no different. They're just a different type of cartel, but they are a cartel. The southern border ones, they do drugs. The ones in Israel, they do terror. But if the southern border ones crossed into terror, look, I think that we should already be taking them out, the cartels. That'll be honest, because they are spilling American blood with fentanyl. And never mind the migrant issue, the guns that come over the border illegally from the South. They're bad people that get ignored as well. But if that started happening here, America would be outraged. The people would be like, how can we let this happen? Why are they launching rockets? They're killing kids. They're attacking playgrounds. They're doing this. They're doing that. And we've seen them shoot into America. We've seen the cartels and coyotes escort illegals or escort drugs to the border. And when law enforcement shows up, they've opened up on them. It was 2 years ago? They had an old Humvee with a 50 cal on top. And when law enforcement showed up to the river because they got a report of people crossing, they opened up on the Texas Police Department that responded with a 50 cal mounted. There's also been reports of technicals firing. You know, so if you're Israel and you're a citizen of Israel, you just want your safety, and you should be allowed to have that safety. I'm a firm believer in that. It's the last 10 minutes of the show. This is usually where I just kind of scroll through what's being reported and just kind of, hopefully if I see something funny, I'll report it. Everyone's talking about, oh, here we go. I wrote a story this week about George Soros on shrmedia.com buying 200 radio stations with a lot of big conservative names. Acaracy, I think, was the name of the company. I know I'm going to be wrong on that. But they bought the 200. George Soros, who shorted the pound. George Soros is not a good human being. I don't give a shit what anyone says. He's horrible. Apparently, I'm just going to cuss, even though it's during the day. His son, who is the heir to the throne, was seen earlier this week with Tim Walz in his office. And, if you read body language, the junior Soros, I don't know what you want to call him, mini me, little Satan, whatever. It was sitting there on this beautiful open office because they're rich, and he's got his hand extended like out over the city. And Tim Walz is in the corner with his hands crossed. Like, body language is everything, and you could tell who is in charge in that situation. It's crazy to me that this is allowed. And I'm looking for it because I know I reposted. I think if I can find it, I'll put it up really quick. But the Soros people, man, people don't realize how much money they dump and destabilized other countries, and they're doing it here too. And if you don't know who George Soros is and what his kid's name is, I think it's Alex Soros. I get so annoyed by him that I can't even remember his name. But if you look, here, there we go. By the way, he's married to Alex Soros is married to Huma Abedin. Who's Huma Abedin? She was Hillary Clinton's right-hand woman for a long time, and her husband was Anthony Weiner, who got caught doing gross things on a computer and talking to underage girls. That I didn't do that. He did that. Don't blame me. I'm just a messenger. But here is Tim Walz with Alex Soros. And I'm gonna see if I can zoom in. And if I can't, I apologize. But if you look at the picture on the left, this one right here, right on the left-hand side, look at the body language. And this actually isn't the original photo I was talking about. It was taken at the same time. Soros was standing there with his hands in his pocket, just calm as collective be. Look at the Waltz body language. And I know he's got weird body language. Everybody knows he has weird body language. I will continue to call him, he's like Richard Simmons without the charisma or exercise, if I'm being completely honest. That's who Tim Walz is. He tries to be like this over-the-top, almost carnival clown-like human being, and he's just really weird. And I said, when I saw that picture, I was like, oh, look, Waltz is going to kiss the ring. He's absolutely going to kiss the ring for Soros for the money. And if you don't know the amount of money, it's in the billions, hundreds of billions of dollars that the Soros family has. And they have been screwing up our country for a long time. George Soros is just horrible. And I'm not the first person to say that. I'm not telling you anything that's like groundbreaking. It's just who it is, or who he is, I should say. As I scroll through, I did see Mayor Glenn Jacobs just reported that evacuations are in Coke County, Tennessee, due to Florida. So that just flashed in front of me. I know they were talking about a dam that was coming over the top due to the amount of rain and water that they're getting. So again, I just feel absolutely horrible. And then finally, before I go into the cocktail for the weekend, I was saving this because it's just, the internet's amazing. And I know Gavin Newsom's going to get so mad at me for sharing this, and I don't give a damn. Trump had a meeting with Vladimir Zelensky, and to discuss, obviously, the Russian-Ukrainian war. There are some people saying, oh, MAGA is all of a sudden for Ukraine. And I don't think that's not the impression that I got. The impression that I got was Trump was saying, no, we're going to end this one way or another. That's how I took the whole press conference. It's out there. I don't have time to play it right now, or I would. It was on my list, but we ran out of time because I went off the rails about the border. But every once in a while, somebody releases something to social media, and X has just been incredible. That just, it, just watch. Look at the size of Zelensky. And if you don't know, I hate Zelensky, by the way. I think he's a horrible human being, and I think he's just he's getting rich off this, and so many other Ukrainian leaders are, and it's, I said last week, it's the Ukrainian soldiers who are the ones that are actually kicking Russia's ass, and Russia deserves it. I'm not saying they don't, but man, he is not a tall person to begin with. I do. I love the internet. It's one of my favorite things in the world because I have a childish sense of humor. I'm the first one to admit it. When I see stuff like that, I had tears coming down my cheeks when I first saw it. I'm not gonna lie. And I watched it on repeat for about 5 minutes. So, the weekend cocktail, because we are coming up to the end. We have just a couple minutes to go. My weekend cocktail choice. I like bourbon. And a lot of these in the future will probably be bourbon based because I'm a big bourbon guy. It's just who I am. But not all. I like other alcohols too. And sometimes you got to mix it up. But fall's here for a lot of people. It's starting to cool down, especially at night. You're looking for a good drink. And I'll tell you right now, my Knob Creek nailed it with this one. I've made this one with Knob Creek several times last year, and I'm actually going to make my first one again tonight because I have Knob Creek over there. If you can get the higher proof, it's better, but it's the nice, simple, classic Manhattan. And it doesn't get any easier. That's 2 parts Knob Creek, 1/2 part sweet vermouth, couple dashes of this is Angostura. I'll tell you right now, there's a couple other bitters out there, and maybe I'll start showing you some of the ones that I've collected over time. There's some other great bitters, but Angostura is not bad. And then it says, my only issue with this is a maraschino cherry. Folks, if you're going to spend money and make a cocktail, I'm going to tell you something right now. And I really want you to look at me for this one because it's kind of important. So let's remove that from the stream there. There we go. Do not use maraschino cherries in your cocktails. Luxardo cherries. There's so many other higher end cherries that are either cooked in whiskey or bourbon or fermented with other alcohols or just made better. Do not buy the red ones from the store. If you love yourself and you're making yourself a cocktail, don't do that. Please. Please. I had to say that because see, so many people have all these great liquors and alcohols, and they make these drinks and they make this concoction, and then they'll throw in the bright red, horrible tasting maraschino cherry, and it's a big deal. Look, you can tell how emotional I'm getting over this. It's a big deal. And how do you make it? This is a simple Manhattan. Pour the whiskey, sweet vermouth, and bitters into a mixing glass. You stir it. Don't shake it. You stir it until it's cold to the touch. I like to use a big rock and a couple of little ice rocks, and I go until there's condensation, till I can barely touch the mixing glass. I strain it. You can put the ice in if you want into a rocks glass. I like to strain it because it doesn't last long enough with me to warm up. And then I garnish it with the cherry. Plain, simple, easy. You'll love it. Try it. If you're just getting into bourbons, this is a great cocktail to have. I love straight bourbon. I'll drink straight bourbon neat, no questions asked, but I also love my mixed drinks. And that was it. That was the quickest hour I've had in the longest time. I did not get to everything, but that's just how the show goes. I'll be back Monday at 12 Pacific, 3 on the East Coast, right here on the SHR Media Network. Wrong way. If you're so inclined and you like the show and you want to give me a hand, it would really make a big difference to here at the SHR Media Network. Check out shrmedia.com. I accidentally crashed the entire website yesterday and had to rebuild it. It's a long story, but there's a new version of it. Yet again, I've been working on that for the last 24 hours, and all of my friends have heard me complain about it. So it's there as well. We're trying to rebuild this network. We're trying to really grow it, and we're hoping this year is a good year for us. So if you're so inclined to give us a hand, that would be outstanding. I would appreciate it. The team would appreciate it. Coming up tonight on the SHR Media Network, I believe Jersey Joe, who is in the path of Hurricane Helene, but I believe he's going to be on at 9 p.m. on the East Coast, 6 Pacific. If not, I will be back Monday at noon Pacific, 3 on the East Coast. This is the Edge of Liberty right here on the SHR Media Network. Have a great weekend.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.